Hi, you're watching or listening to the Shift Training Channel,
where we talk about personal development, we talk about mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual health, and just overall well-being.
And today we're going to be talking about rights and responsibilities. I think the question for the day in this episode is going to be which is more important, or which is the higher priority, or which comes first between rights and freedoms, or responsibility and consideration.
Interesting. Which one do you think comes first?
Now I want to hear your thoughts on this.
I think I would say, I think it all comes down to your own responsibility for yourself first, because I think your rights and freedom, it's outside of your control. I think we all have to work on what we can control in ourselves, whether it be mental, emotional, physical, anything that will require that is something that in control for us. I think those freedom and morals, I think it's hard to control that.
So I think this is a question that I posted on my Instagram, and a student responded, and we had an interesting conversation because he's very much so into like politics and things like that, and government and such. And we talked a little about, and psychology and stuff, and we talked a little bit about that briefly. And the example that we talked about was, I think he said something along the lines of that, like the rights and freedoms that we have in this country, are kind of came first, or kind of like that's why we can do certain stuff. And then I said, well, how did we even get to the point of having this country? And in short, it was kind of like, how did we end up here? How do we even get a constitution? Like, someone had to take on the responsibility. And the Constitution is supposed to consider many circumstances in order to maintain the idea that we will have rights and freedoms, that our rights and freedoms will be honored. We must just take on this responsibility here of building this nation with consideration to these things, such as the rights and freedoms in which we wish to enjoy. And I think that example that he initially started with, I think is a solid example. And it's not just for government or whatever, because I don't really talk about that stuff. I think if you think about nature or in life, I'll present this question to you, Vaughn.
Okay.
Do you think that you started to feel or experience more freedom in your life before taking responsibility for your life, or after taking more responsibility for your life?
Before, I think.
You felt more free before you started taking responsibility for your life?
Oh no, after taking responsibility.
I was like, I don't know. That sounds weird, but it doesn't sound like you.
Well, the way I think of it is, let's say I wanted to make this business better, better rules, better anything overall. And first, if I'm new in this company, then I have to show up with my best, know everything about the company. And if there is something that I want to improve, then I have to do that for myself first. How can I do better for myself? How can I help other people, help facilitate and improve the company? But first, before I even present that, I have to earn that and show it to the company that I not deserve. Maybe that not the word, but
that you can earn it.
Yeah, I earn that respect of why I want to kind of change this rule.
I think that's an important one too. Like, I think we'll go with that area. So, for example, if you're looking for like a raise in your job, a lot of successful entrepreneurs talk about this and talk about being an entrepreneur as well. Like, how are you contributing to the company? How are you helping it grow? And it's easy. If you take on more responsibility than your role, and you do more, you contribute more, you have leverage, or it's way more, believable or receivable when you go to say, hey, I'd like to step into this other role where that perhaps comes with better pay, potentially more freedoms, but it also comes with more responsibility. You might have a few more rights than a couple other members of the same team who didn't take the initiative you took, but you don't get it by avoiding the responsibility, avoiding the work, hanging out in the cut. Like nobody promotes or rewards the person that's doing the least on the boat, trying to duck and dodge everything. Nobody rewards that person.
Yeah, I think you have to also take that initiative, you know, like if you really want to get better and improve this company, then you have to communicate with your boss. Like we talked about earlier, or the last few episodes that we did about expectation, you have to communicate that and make some agreements or whatever it is. I think it all comes down to like putting in your work, taking initiative, and through your action and putting all those hours.
Can we backtrack a second?
Yeah.
You said having, in the moment that you said having agreements, I'd like to touch on that. So you said having an agreement, so you have expectations, and we're talking about responsibility and consideration.
Right.
For me, they're not separate, they're together. So for example, if we have an agreement, we come to some sort of agreement, and now we have this clear term of expectations, I am now responsible for delivering my part. If I deliver my part with consideration for whatever you got to do and whatever we got to do, and I'm considerate of that, and I deliver or over deliver,
that's the expectation.
I should have all the freedom and rights I want because I smashed this goal. I did it. I did it. I exceeded it. You know, I delivered, right?
Right.
And I think to have that expectation after you do it, I think is reasonable. To have the expectation that you should be able to do whatever when you don't deliver, I don't think that's I think everyone immediately goes, like you just said, not fair. I think most people go, that's not right. Like for example, like this happens, you'll have people who work in a family business and who will be like unfairly or unreasonable favored or promoted or something like that, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, you know, maybe that person does something for that person's heart or whatever, like they love them, whatever. But if, you know, we would all say, that's not fair. They dodge their work all the time. They don't do that.
Yeah.
So I think one of the things to keep in mind, like for me, you asked me in the beginning, you said, which do I think comes first? I think responsibility and consideration come first, because when you are responsible and you consider the outcomes and how they affect not only yourself, but others, and you move and take responsibility for that to the best of your ability. When more people than not do that, we tend to end up in situations where we have more freedom and more rights. The freedom or aspect of freedom, meaning that we can move and things be all right because we're not scared of every freaking thing that's gonna happen. Why? Because we have seen that we can be, and you can be, and I can be, we can be responsible and considerate. The environment becomes safer.
Yeah.
Better for learning, better for moving, better for exploring freedom. And, you know, feeling like, hey, I'm safe, I've got some rights. That person's not going to invade my sovereign rights because I know they'll consider, they wouldn't want that to happen. They don't, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That's how you create that. So for me, it's always going to be responsibilities and consideration first before rights and freedom. Everyone, you got some rights, like some natural rights. Like I was born with the right to breathe.
Right.
I get to breathe. But people talk about freedom of speech. I'm not going to talk about this one too long because people get triggered. But, you know, I have the right to say whatever I want. I just know that sometimes if I like to keep my right, I don't say certain things at certain times because sometimes threats are very real. And I think that's something to be mindful of. If you're considerate of the timing in which you get to maintain whatever right, and it doesn't mean you should be living in fear of it. I have no fear about if I shut up at the right time, I'm not going to get hit in the face. But if I keep talking, someone might try to hit me in the face, I automatically know I have to defend myself. Now, how did I get to that situation? I cannot control that other person's hand or their demeanor. But what I could have done was I could have tried to control my mouth and de-escalate the situation. And I chose otherwise. At which point, I also have the right to get hit in the mouth. Now, that is maybe not the best example or most PC example, but I think it's an example that most people can relate to because it's very physical. It's very obvious.
Yeah, I think this also related to like having responsibility with your own thoughts and emotions. And before you even have that freedom of your own mind, then you have to take care of those.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you can't be responsible for your feelings for yourself or anything like that. You're never going to feel like you have any ownership or autonomy in your life.
Right.
So you're never going to feel free. You're never going to feel like I have rights, or you might feel like you're entitled to stuff. Oh, and I think that's a very different thing. We'll talk about that another time. There's this thing where like people mistake like rights with entitlement, but I don't think you can have rights without responsibility. The idea that you would have a right to something without responsibility equals entitlement. So for example, I have a right to own part of my parents' company, even though I don't do jack nothing for it. I was just born into it. Whereas this other person busting their butt to really contribute to that business, I think they have more of a right because they're taking the responsibility, they're contributing, and you over here feeling entitled. And you might, you know, your family might agree with your entitlement. But I personally would say that's entitlement, because entitlement comes from, it has this whole, I deserve even though I didn't earn it.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. I think that's a good example. So you're saying that entitlement comes from having certain status without you taking responsibility or not contributing, while self-rights, you're putting the effort, the energy, the time in a certain status that you have.
Right. The right to vote is preserved by the fact that people are continuing to go vote, and we socially seem to agree that we should have the right to vote. And if that were blocked or stopped or turned upside down, then people would make an effort to bring it back. And that's what enables the right to vote. But if everyone stopped acting like they cared about the right to vote, it would go away. And I'm not saying go vote, I'm not pushing any political thing, whatever. But I'm just using that as a clear example.
Yeah.
To feel that we're entitled to it is a totally different thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, so back to the original question. Everyone has to decide for themselves. We've already given our 2 cents.
Yeah.
I've definitely given mine. Yeah, which comes first, which is the higher priority. We're talking about rights and freedoms or responsibility and consideration. Vaughn, is there anything else?
I think that's it for us.
Where can they find us?
Don't forget to follow us on Shift on Your Life on our social media. And don't forget to subscribe on our YouTube, Shift Training.
All right, guys. Thank you. We appreciate you. And we're looking forward to, I guess, talking with you in the next one. Bye.